Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here and to be around all these beautiful women and all of these beautiful givers. And thank you for that lovely introduction. So, yes, my name is Sarah Seeley, and my company is called Thai Brooklyn. It's a product company, but also I have been an intuitive healer, body worker, and somatic coach for about the last 10, 15 years or so. And I lately have been teaching a lot of workshops for the last 4 or 5 years on offering trauma-informed healing. And that brought me to start this workshop because I think a lot of what I noticed for myself is that I'm a giver. I love to give, love to give. I love to give presents. I love to give advice. I love to give help. I love to give body work. I love to give healing. And I'm so good at intuiting other people's needs that I'll just take care of needs that they don't even know that they have. And I'll just keep giving and giving and giving and giving. And it's like, oh, do you need love? Do you need support? Do you need a friend? Do you need this? Do you need that? And what I have found is that if I'm not careful, I can get really burned out, really burned out. And when I get burned out, I tend to get resentful, angry, anxious, depressed. And I'm sure we can all kind of raise our hands and be like, oh yeah, me too. So that is what brings me here today, is that I want to talk a little bit about how to care for yourself as a natural giver. And so I think first, to begin, I want to invite everyone, if it's available to you, to sit back a little bit from your screen. And so wherever you are, if you have a chair, you have something to lean against, I want to just invite you to start by leaning back. And the reason for this is that as givers, we tend to lean in and we lean forward. What can I do for you? How can I help? Oh, I'll take care of that. And we can be very forward. And when we're forward, it's almost like we have these blinders on where all we see is what's in front of us. But when we lean back, it allows us to open our focus, to notice our surroundings, and to also start to lean into the support that we have available to us. And so just by leaning back, I'm going to invite you to begin by closing your eyes. And almost as though your eyes are these heavy marbles, start to imagine your eyes rolling into the center of your head and maybe rolling down to land at the back base of your skull. You don't need your eyes right now. You can allow your eyes to rest. And with that, notice how that may also invite you to soften your jaw and soften the back of your neck. Maybe let go of maybe 5% of the tension you're holding in your shoulders. While you're here, I want you just to begin to scan your internal environment. Notice how your heart is feeling, beating inside of your chest. Notice your breath. Is it deep? Is it shallow? Is it easy? Do you feel like you have to work for it? How deep into your body does your breath go? Begin to notice your body. Are you holding any tension anywhere? Is there any uncomfortability? So, not that we have to change it or we have to do anything about it, we're just allowing ourselves to notice. Just take a moment to be with ourselves as we are at this moment. And now I want to invite a visualization. I want you to imagine a time that you felt at peace, a time that you felt alive, just recalling that first memory that comes to you, the time that you felt at peace, the time that you felt loved, or a time that you felt most alive. And sometimes when we recall a memory, it can almost be as though we are looking at it as though we're watching a movie, that we're outside of ourselves. So, in this memory, I want to invite you to embody yourself in this memory. Maybe you can see your hands. You can notice the way the light looks on your hands, starting to see the space or the environment around you, recalling the time of day. Allow to the sounds that you remember in this moment, the temperature. Maybe you can even see the faces of anyone around you and see how those faces are able to also reflect back to you your joy, your peace. Allow yourself to fully immerse into this memory, this visualization, and almost as though you can turn the dial up, like almost like you can turn the volume up on this memory. I want to invite you to turn that dial up a little bit stronger. Invite those sensations of this moment to come in even stronger. Allow that light to be brighter. Allow those sounds to be a little louder. Allow that feeling you have in that moment to be a little bigger. And then take another moment to check in with your body now. What do you notice that's changed? What feels differently now? How do your muscles feel? How does your posture feel? How is your breath? How is the beating of your heart with this memory? And when you're ready, I want to slowly invite you back to your space by starting to open your eyes a little bit. And with a soft focus, maybe glance around your space and find something in your space that is alive, whether it's a window to the outdoors, a plant, an animal friend, a picture on the wall of something natural. Just do a very light scan and allow your eyes to settle on something that feels alive to you. And allow that object, that window, that plant that animal companion, to also witness you and your aliveness. And then slowly come back. Okay. So I just want to check in if anyone wants to comment. I'm curious what the difference was between the first check-in and the second check-in. So we first checked in with how we were doing at the beginning, and then we allowed ourselves to immerse into a memory of peace, of aliveness, of a time that we felt really good. And I'm curious to know how that changed what you're noticing in your body. I think at times we can run on very high energy and we don't even realize it until we take that moment to check in. For me, when I first checked in, I noticed that my heart was racing a little bit. I always get a little nervous when I teach. Are they going to like me? Am I going to mess up? You know, those kinds of things. And I noticed that my breath was a little shallow. But somehow, even just leaning back into my backspace, taking that time to slow and quiet my voice and guide you into this memory, I noticed that I feel much more at peace and I feel more relaxed in my nervous system. And so that's the first thing that I want to talk to you about today, is that a lot of caring for ourselves as givers, I think, you know, Rachel and I had this great conversation on Instagram Live, and what I was talking about is that self-care has become this very buzzword, and it's come to mean, you know, meditating or going to yoga or taking a bubble bath. And yet, so many of us have so many things that we're always doing, especially as women. We're taking care of households, you might have children, you might have dependents, you might have partners, you might have businesses. And we can very much feel like we're being pulled in totally different directions, to the point where we wake up and the first thing that happens is like, okay, what do I need to get done today? And that is a state that I would say is a very nervous system state, where we get very amplified. And we're going. And at times we can get to the point where we exceed our capacity. We exceed our capacity to be able to give. And a bubble bath isn't going to fix it. Yoga might help for a moment, but essentially what we really truly need to do is take this moment to lean back, step away from all the things that are going on, and just do a quick internal check. What am I noticing in my body? If you're noticing tension, tightness, pain, shortness of breath, if you're noticing your heart racing, that's usually an indication that you are in a more amplified nervous system state. And when we are in a nervous system state that is very up, something that happens is that our middle ear closes up. That's the part of our ear that is responsible for us to be able to distinguish human voice from background noise. And so when we are in an amplified nervous system state, you literally cannot hear what another person is saying to you. We'll just be in a go, go, go. Our eyes will begin to dilate. We'll have a really hard time making eye contact. We'll maybe feel cold. We'll feel like we're sweating. There's going to be all these different things that happen in our body that we may not register if we're not paying attention. And so when we take a moment to lean back, open up our focus, turn it a little inward. What am I noticing in my body? We can take the temperature of what's happening inside to be able to judge whether or not we have the capacity to do what we feel we need to do or what we're being asked to do. And so that brings me to my next point, which is that I think the biggest thing that we can offer to ourselves as givers is boundaries. And so what do I even mean by boundaries? Everyone talks about boundaries. Oh, you need to set boundaries. And what does that look like? And what does that even mean? So I think before we even get into the conversation of boundaries, I want to take a moment to demystify our emotions a little bit. Because I think while it's unfamiliar for us to check in with our bodies, we can usually check in with our emotions and know what's going on with our emotions, right? And so I wanted to just go through them and let you know that they're, from an anthropological point of view, speaking only anthropologically, an emotion is something that can be registered on our face. And so I can show a picture of someone who's sad in Papua New Guinea to someone in Sweden, and they can just look and see that picture and say, oh, that person is sad. And so speaking on that point, emotions, there's only six. There's only six. And so I'm going to go through them and tell you what they are. There is anger. There is sadness. There is fear, disgust, shock or surprise, and joy. So anger, fear, sadness, disgust, shock, joy. That's it. That's all we get. We get six emotions. Is there any surprises in hearing that? Anything on that list that's missing for you that you're curious about? You can go ahead and type in. Yeah, go ahead.
Huge list of emotions. When I'm a teacher, and so we were taught, like, we're teaching children how to regulate emotions, and we were using those lists of like 50 different emotions. But I guess when you're saying that, they're all just shades of that one emotion.
Absolutely. There are always gradations for sure. And I think sometimes too, we can start to label behaviors as emotions. Whenever I give this list to my students, something that comes up is like, well, what about love? Love's chemical, love's a behavior. You know, someone can say that they love you, but if they're not acting lovingly towards you, call it something else. That's not what that is. Love is a behavior. I've also been asked about judgment. You know, judgment is another gradation, it's another behavior, and it's usually a reflection of how we feel about ourselves internally, or it's a protection of our belief systems. Let's see, Vanessa, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did, because I have a great chart. I love this chart. I'll be more than happy to share it with everybody else.
I've seen that one before.
And one of the things that you did not mention was bad, which then spills into bored, busy, stressed, tired, indifferent, pressured, rushed, overwhelmed. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Out of control, sleepy, unfocused.
Yep. So I'm going to say that maybe those aren't so much emotions, because you can't really register them on someone's face. But what you're describing is more of a nervous system state. And so in our nervous system, we have one of two choices. We either feel safe or we feel unsafe. And that's it. That's all we've got. We either feel safe or we feel unsafe. And when we feel unsafe, there's a couple of different options that we have. We can drop down from safety into something like a fight or flight situation. And so that can feel like nervous, overwhelmed, anxious, or we can drop down even further in our nervous system to a freeze state where we feel bad, lonely, tired, depressed, withdrawn, those kinds of things. And so I would say in that regard, we're describing nervous system. And so there's two things that are always going on in our bodies and in every human being's body, is that we have our nervous system, which is operating, and then we have our limbic system, which governs our emotions. And so whenever you're in another nervous system state other than safety, it is extremely challenging to be able to connect with another human being. The whole reason that our nervous system allows us to come into a place of safety is so that we can connect. Our middle ear opens up, we can hear human voice. Our eyes dilate and open so that we can make eye contact. We also can co-regulate with nervous systems. You probably have had that experience where you are feeling one way, you feel totally fine, and then someone bursts into the room and they're like, oh my God, da 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 da, and you're like, what do we need to do? And you just jump right into it, right? We can co-regulate. So now my nervous system has gotten amplified because your nervous system is amplified. But we also have this ability to co-regulate in the other way, where someone comes into the room, oh my God, da 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 da, and my response now is to lean back, take in a breath. Okay, tell me what's going on. And I can bring them into a more calm nervous state by taking care of my own. And so this is kind of the point that I want to drive home, is that as being caregivers, rather than reacting, jumping forward, what can I do? Oh my gosh, let me get on that. We can lean back, take a breath, and then respond. So response is different than a reaction. And I do want to double back. Sorry, did you have a question, Vanessa?
No, I had a comment. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like smoking without a cigarette.
Sure. Say more about what you mean.
It just, when people smoke, they inhale deeply. They kind of relax their shoulders. They feel this sense of calm come over them. Granted, they're poisoning themselves. No offense to any smokers on the call, but it's kind of like smoking a cigarette without a cigarette. Just kind of doing the same motion. It's even just the hand to the mouth, the breathing deeply. Some close their eyes with that first drag. They let it settle in.
Yeah.
Relax their shoulders, they kind of relax their whole body. They let it all out. So that's always the analogy that I've always used.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think that we tend to feel like we need to react right away, especially in work situations or with our children, is that as soon as, your boss comes in, Sarah, I need da 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 from you right away, And I'm like, okay, let me jump on that. And now my heart rate's up and now I'm racing and now I'm operating from a heightened nervous system state, right? But if my boss comes in, Sarah, I need da 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 da, and I take a second to lean back, take a breath, and say, okay, Bob, I will get on that. Thank you so much. Now I'm staying calm and I'm probably actually going to get a lot more work done and probably better quality work if I'm operating from a place of leaning back than leaning forward and reacting rather than coming back to response. And so when we start to know a little bit about how the nervous system works, that when we can start to see if someone is in an amplified nervous system state, you kind of have this superpower where now you can see it, you can understand it, and you can lean back, breathe, and invite them with your nervous system to come join you in the chill place. And when people are amplified, when we are amplified, the things that will always help us to calm our nervous systems down are soothing activities. So like you were saying, Vanessa, drawing in a deep breath, taking a moment to lean back, humming, singing, swaying, rocking. All of these things are really good for helping our nervous systems to calm down. And even little things like, if I'm at a desk, and I can't really sway or hum or something because I'm at work, I can just do something, and I'll invite you to do the same. Just put your hands on your thighs and just stroke from the top of your thighs down towards your knees. Any kind of stroking motion, we can even do that on our arms. Sometimes even just putting a hand on your heart, maybe even just try that and just see what that does for you. A hand on your heart allows you to lean back and to quiet your nervous system as well. And so I think that's the first lesson, is just how to respond instead of react. And I want to double back to what I was talking about with the emotions too, because I want to just demystify them quickly for you, because I think it will help. So let me go through them. So anger. Okay. So what anger is telling us is that a boundary has been crossed. Anger is saying that a boundary has been crossed. The size of the anger is going to be equal to the size of the boundary. Okay. Fear is really saying to us, am I safe? Am I safe? Sadness tells us that something has changed and it is never going to be the same again. Something has changed and it's never going to be the same again. And it's okay to be sad when things change and they're not going to be the same again. Disgust. We can see that on a face, right? We like wrinkle our nose and pull back. I don't like the look of that. My grandmother, I would sometimes put food in front of her. She would wrinkle her nose and just shake her head and be like, I don't like the look of that. And that's what disgust is really telling us, is that something ain't right. Something ain't right. And we get that with smells, with food, with people, with like situations and environments. I don't like the look of that. We'll definitely feel disgust. Shock or surprise. You know, you're coming home from a long day of work, you walk into a dark home, all of a sudden the lights turn on and 50 people jump out and yell surprise, and you're like, right? So shock, surprise, it's really just telling you, do I need to act? Do I need to act? And we'll always go into like, you know, shoulders come up, everything tenses, we're on the ready, do I need to act? Okay. And then when maybe look around the room, we're like, oh, these are my friends. Oh, I'm having a surprise party. Oh, okay. And our nervous system will start to calm down. You know, but shock, surprise is always, do I need to act? And then there's joy. And joy is really telling us that something is delightful. Something has delighted me. And so I think when we just narrow the emotions down into like really digestible pieces, and we think about each emotion as having information to share, a lot of my students say to me like, well, you know, there's like 5 negative emotions and only 1 good one. But I don't see any of the emotions as being negative. I see them all as offering information. And from the nervous system standpoint, anger, fear, disgust, shock, they're all wondering if you're safe or not. Is this food safe to eat? Is this situation safe for me to be in? Is this, you know, new venture that I'm taking safe for me to take? Is, you know, this person who's stepping on my boundaries safe for me to be around? And so it's really just wondering if you're safe. And when we feel sadness, again, that's another nervous system state as well. You know, our nervous system communicates to our limbic system. We sense something in our environment, our body goes into adjusting on a nervous system level, all kinds of chemicals get sent out to the limbic system so that we have the appropriate emotional response to what's going on. And really, our emotions from a limbic biological standpoint, they only last for about 30 seconds to a minute. That's all we've got from a chemical place. The reason that our emotions can go on and on and on is then usually because of the story we tell ourselves about them. Oh, I'm feeling sad because, and then our brain goes searching and is like, oh, I'm feeling sad. When else have I felt sad? Oh, I know. And then let me draw in all these other memories of times that I felt sad, you know? And so I think just narrowing it down to understanding and caring for yourself in a way of noticing when your nervous system is in another place other than safety. Hopefully during the meditation, you found just being in a place of peace, of aliveness. Hopefully you found that kind of baseline of what it feels like to feel safe. And you might have noticed when you began, that there was maybe like a little agitation or something that maybe felt unsafe. But we can always start to now notice when we're getting rocked out of our nervous system and into another place other than feeling safe, feeling grounded, able to be connected. Does that all make sense so far? Okay. Any questions? I want to just pause and check in. I'm giving a lot of information. I only have an hour, so I'm like, let me tell you everything. Okay. All right. So, in speaking about safety, I want to talk a little bit about boundaries. I started to talk about them. What are they? How do we set them? All right. So, a boundary is really how we teach people how to love us. It's how we teach people how to love us. Boundaries look a lot like saying no, but boundaries also look a lot like stating our needs and stating our needs. And so we said earlier that when it comes to anger, anger is going to come up when a boundary has been crossed. And so if you don't really know what your boundaries are or what a boundary is, if you notice that you feel angry or a gradation of anger, resentful, frustrated, those kinds of things, then you can start to say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling angry. That means a boundary has been crossed. And now let me think about what is that boundary that's been crossed. And then we can start to check in with ourselves. So I've noticed that, as a giver, because I'm just so dang good at it, that when people ask me to do something, I'm like, yeah, let me just get on it. And I will just say, I will just yes so many times and just be like, oh, of course I can do that. Oh, of course I can help you. Oh, of course I can offer this. And I've gotten into this place, in the last several years where I have been really practicing how to say no. And I love it. I love saying no now. It's become this really fun thing that I get to play with, where, I even practice in the mirror sometimes. I like make sure that I get my face in the right way where, I'm still looking really pleasant and it's not like screwed up in some weird way, but I'm working on my script. And my script for saying no usually is like, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me. That sounds like a really amazing opportunity, but now it's not the right time. But I hope that we'll be able to work with each other again in the future. Or, I really want to help you, but I'm in the middle of something right now. So maybe I can circle back in about an hour or two and check in and see if you still need help. And so these kinds of boundaries and different artful ways of saying no, I have found that at first, when we begin to say no, or we begin to set a boundary, is that the emotion that you will usually feel is guilt. You'll feel guilty. You'll feel bad. I would say that's a gradation of fear. I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt this person's feelings. I'm afraid that I'm going to let them down. I'm afraid that if I don't do it, it won't get done right, or it won't get done at all. But just know that we're always going to start to feel guilty, at first, because we're used to this particular dynamic of giving and giving and giving. But boundaries are so important because boundaries are how we call ourselves back home to ourselves. Boundaries are how we teach other people how to love us. Boundaries are also how we love another person. When we start to notice other people's boundaries and we take care of other people's boundaries, we're also showing love in that way as well. And for instance, I had this client recently who has this really kind of tumultuous relationship with her father. Loves her dad, really wants to stay connected to him. But whenever they talk on the phone, he tends to just talk and talk and talk and talk and never really ask her any questions about herself, or doesn't really give any room for her to have a conversation. She's mostly just an audience for something that he has to say. And she goes to visit him in Florida once a year. And her boundary at this point is that she doesn't stay with him. She gets her own separate Airbnb. She doesn't rely on him for transportation. She also rents a car. So these are boundaries, okay? I get my own space, I get my own vehicle, I'm setting a boundary, okay? And then she also has noticed is that when she's in Florida, she'll go down for about a month, and she's also working, she works on her computer and she has all these Zoom calls and things, but he really wants like unfettered access to her. He wants to see her all the time. He wants to overstay his welcome. And she's been working for a little while to set these boundaries with him. And so one of those looks like, I'm working between the hours of da 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 da, and I'm only available to see you between the hours of 6 and 8. And after 8 o'clock, I need you to leave, because that's my time where I have to wind down, get ready for bed, and get myself ready to be able to work again in the morning. Okay, so she's been able to say these things to him. And he, for the most part, has been able to hear it. And he's like, oh, yeah, of course, of course, of course. The moment she gets down to Florida and he comes over and they have dinner, don't you know it, 8 o'clock rolls around and he's talking. He's not going anywhere. And she'll be looking at her watch. She's like, Dad, I really need you to go. Like, I've got to get ready for bed. Oh, yeah, of course. And then he'll just keep talking and nothing's happening. Okay. So one of the things that I worked out with her is that sometimes with people who don't have boundaries, and we know what that looks like, people will always poke holes in boundaries. They're going to just step over them. When people don't have boundaries, we really have to teach them how to honor ours. And so, unfortunately, I realize that her dad is a 68-year-old man, but I'm coaching her to basically treat him like a small child. So, with children, right? Let's say that your toddler doesn't want to put their shoes on, and you're like, okay, I need you to put your shoes on, and then they're not doing it. So then the next step that we take is, do you need me to help you put your shoes on? So then we start to help, right? And then they are like, no, I can do it myself, but then they're not putting their shoes on. So then the third step is, let me do this for you, okay? And so in that scenario with my client, that looks a lot like, Dad, it's 8 o'clock, I need to wrap this up because I need to go to bed. Oh, he's not leaving. Okay. Let me start to, pack up what I need to do and start to, maybe guide him to the door, open the door and say, okay, it's time for you to go, show him the way. That's not working. Okay, so now I might have to put my hand on his back and say, remember when we talked about this and you agreed that you were going to leave at 8? I really need you to do that now. Okay. And so sometimes we just have to really enforce our boundaries, and it's going to be a lot of work, especially when we're not used to setting them, especially when people in our lives aren't used to us having boundaries. And so it's really important with a boundary when we begin to set it that we have a very clear script about what it is that we're asking for, and that we return to our script. In my client's scenario, we spoke about this. You said that you were going to leave at 8, and I need you to go ahead and honor the agreement that we made. And then he'll just keep talking. Dad, you said you were going to leave at 8. We spoke about this. I need you to honor the agreement that we made. Okay. And so it's just going to feel like you're repeating yourself over and over and over again. But eventually, people will begin to catch up and they will begin to start to honor your boundaries. And what that does is it also teaches them not just how to love you and how to honor your boundaries, but it also teaches them what a healthy boundary looks like. I haven't said anything mean. I haven't, hurt anyone's feelings, hopefully. And if they get their feelings hurt, then that's kind of on them. But all I've done is just in a really loving way of ask that you stick to the agreement that we made, and that you stick to honoring the boundary that I need, where I need this time for myself. And so that is my little talk on boundaries. I want to check in and see if anyone has any questions. I'm noticing a lot of activity going on in the chat, so I want to just pause here to read that. Okay. Any questions? Anything anyone want to share?
I think that last comment from Carol, I'd love to also hear you speak on that, which is sometimes I
Mhm.
also have the opposite. I'm so sensitive to others. I am meek to ask for help or to ask for something. Am I over respecting
Mhm.
boundaries? So I don't
Right.
ask or stress how to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And so I think sometimes with boundaries, when we notice that people have them, we can start to ask how to work with their boundaries. You know, I noticed that with my partner that when he's in an overwhelmed state, that's not a really good time for me to be like, let's talk about our relationship. you know, because I will usually be met with a lot of anger because I'm crossing a boundary. He's already overwhelmed. He's not available to have that conversation right now. But that doesn't negate the fact that I have things that I need to talk about and work through with him, right? And so, in respect of his boundary, I can now say, you know, I can see that you have a lot going on. I have a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. I'm going to need some time to get into it with you. And I'm wondering when would be a good time. Those kinds of things. We can start to like ask people about their boundaries and get a little bit more curious about them. Or even if someone seems as though they completely lack the capacity to be able to show up for you, you can also state that as a boundary, because stating our needs is also a boundary. When I state my needs, I'm stating a boundary. And so we can say, I realize that you have a lot going on and it seems like you're really overwhelmed a lot of the time, and my heart really goes out to you. But in this relationship, I also need a little bit of your time and attention as well. And we need to talk about how we're going to find a reciprocity in this, because I'm tabling a lot of what's going on for me because I don't feel like I can approach you with it. Carol, does that help a little bit?
It does. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything you're saying and for addressing my question. And it's ironic, or it's interesting, because it's for the people that I know have boundaries. It's easier for me to ask because I already know that they can take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more people maybe that I'm a little intimidated by, and I'm not quite sure. I'm afraid of, I'm like, do double think, oh, am I asking too many questions? So I think it's helpful for what you said to, like, how do you ask the question without putting yourself down, but telling your friend that you're respectful of them, but you would love their help or love their advice or.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to is that every personal relationship dynamic is so individual and it's so different. And everybody is going to need a different way of being approached. And we're going to need a different way of being approached by each and every other person. And so boundaries is really, it's like a process of self-discovery, but also discovery of the people that you're in relationship with. And it's become kind of this like fun thing for me, where if I start to notice that another person is getting angry, that's my indication. Oh, this person is starting to get angry. There's a boundary that's been crossed. I can either ask them about it, or I can just sort of like think about the situation and what's been going on. And then I can start to adjust accordingly to that boundary if it feels right for me to do so, But, and then similarly, I have a really fun time of finding like really artful, loving ways of setting boundaries with others, where I will, I always ask myself, what's the most loving way that I can set this boundary? How can I set this in a way that's kind and compassionate, but also gets my point across, And sometimes boundaries need to be pretty strict, you know, like if I'm doing a body work session and, you know, I've had this happen maybe once where like a client, you know, touched me inappropriately. And, you know, and it wasn't so super inappropriate. It was really just like, you know, he touched my ankle in kind of this like caressing way. And so my boundary at that point was just like, I just pushed his hand down really firmly and just said, I do not like to be touched while I'm working. And that was it. That was the only boundary that I needed to set with him. But then there's other softer boundaries that I can set, which is, I really want to hear the rest of what you have to say, but I'm running out of time and I need to get to something, but I do want to continue this conversation at a later time. I haven't really hurt anyone's feelings. I can also state a need, you know, when we talk, you know, it feels a lot like you talk over me. And I know that you love me and I know that you care about me. And part of how I feel loved and cared for is being seen, heard, and listened to. And so I want to know that if we can practice talking in a way where you take moments to pause and hear what I have to say, or if you can help me be part of this conversation by asking me some questions about my life. You know, hopefully I haven't hurt anyone's feelings saying any of those things, but I've stated needs and I've stated pretty clear boundaries. Yeah. Vanessa, you had a question, I think?
Yeah, technology kind of now helps you set boundaries, especially with the new iOS 14 that just came out that allows for you to silence yourself. You know, everybody's starting to see it via text message that, you know, we used to see text messages and know exactly when somebody read it, and then we would like agonize as to why they haven't responded yet. I know you read it 5 minutes ago. Why is it taking you so long to respond back? Now, iOS 14 allows for it to say they've silenced their notifications. So technology actually helps you do that, which is great. And it's something to utilize as well, especially if you struggle with setting that boundary. Now technology's kind of done it for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, there's so many different ways to set boundaries. And it's interesting that you say that, because I have you know, I know for myself, like if I send a text to somebody and I don't hear back from them, I know that I do that often because I get very busy, and, you know, unfortunately I can't swipe my text to be unread like I can with my emails to keep like an ongoing to-do list, you know, and so sometimes texts get lost, you know, but I have a couple of friends who go into storytelling mode where if I don't respond to them right away, then they're just like, well, what the hell is her problem? And like, what did I ever do to her? And like, I can't believe that she's just writing me off, you know, and it's very interesting. And so what I have found is that I just need to have that as a conversation and say, you know, there have been times that I've texted you and I haven't heard back from you. And I know it's because you're busy. And what I would love from you is for you to give me that same sort of compassion and understanding and allowance, you know, just know that if I don't get,
wouldn't that be self-deprecating? I don't want to self-deprecate myself.
I don't think that's self-deprecating.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I think
I know you're busy. You're giving them an excuse. They might not be busy. They just might not want to deal with you.
Well, it could be anything. It's like,
Okay.
I assume that you had something else going on. Like either way, I don't take it personally, you know?
Got it.
And so I guess that's more to the point, is like not really necessarily taking people's responses, reactions personally. Because usually, I mean, my therapist says, she's like, people are only 5% present, and that's actually being supremely generous. Most of the time, they're filtering their responses, they're filtering their conversations, they're filtering what you're saying, how you're being, what you're doing. They're filtering it through their own experience and their own self. And so people are very rarely very present. And so sometimes it's, you know, I would just say, like, not to take things personally, just go ahead and just say, all I know, the only information that I have is that I sent this person a text and I didn't hear back. The rest of it is my own storytelling about what that is or why. you know? And so I think in talking to my friends who get really upset when they don't hear back from me, I can just say to them, sometimes when I write to you and I don't hear back, I just assume that you have a lot going on, or that you got busy, or you just forgot. And there's like, and sometimes that happens to me too. And it doesn't mean that I don't love you or that I didn't appreciate hearing from you. And I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you right away, but I'm here now, and we can always do that and find repair. Okay. So let's see, I just want to check in again.
Yes, maybe for the last few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah Beth, you were speaking and Tammy kind of highlighted it here, something about feelings of overwhelm have to do with our internal measuring stick of self-worth. And then you just touched on that too, of like, it's part of the conversation has to do with the stuff that comes up within you. Sarah Beth, do you want to talk on that for a moment? I would love to hear what Sarah says.
Hi. So I think it's another Sarah. I didn't comment, but I'm loving this. And I just wanted to thank you so much. I can't wait to watch this again and share it with all my friends and family and all these women that need to hear this. But I will say one thing, and I do think it's another Sarah. I watched the conversation that you and Rachel had on Instagram while I was making dinner, and I listened to it. And your story about going horseback riding, and this man talked for the first 20 minutes of your hour lesson. You're like, dude, I only have 40 minutes left. I over talk often because I get very excited. And that really, really helped me because I don't want to be robbing somebody else of something. So just that awareness was a good reminder. And I wanted to tell you that really resonated with me. And I needed to hear it. And thank you. But Rachel, thanks for asking. So I think there's another Sarah on this that maybe wants to share. So anyways, I love you guys and I have to rock and roll, but I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving this gift to us this morning. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. Sarah, on your iPhone, did you have a question?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. Wanted to check in. Okay. Anybody else have any questions before we kind of wrap up? I know that was a lot of information, but I suppose that the big takeaway from this that I want to just bring home is to always take a moment before you react. Notice that in our systems, that when something comes at us, that we will always, feel this this is a reaction, and this is a response. Okay. And you can always just, even if you need that reminder, just a hand on your heart, call yourself back, lean back, and check in and see, do I have the capacity for this particular thing at this particular time? And practicing the art of saying no, practicing the art of setting our boundaries, practicing the art of just asking for what we need from people is a huge step in caring for ourselves. It probably is the biggest step, bigger than bubble baths, bigger than yoga. Setting boundaries is really one of the best practices, and it's the most necessary, I think, for givers, because givers need to set boundaries because takers rarely will. And so we really need to remember to call ourselves home, take stock of what we have available, and take stock of what we have the capacity for, and then be able to give from an authentic place of resourceness rather than reacting from a place of already giving too much. Okay. So I will